So The Black Phone was directed by Scott Derrickson and it stars Ethan Hawke, Mason Thames, Madeline McGrave, and it's about this guy who kidnaps kids, and one kid is kidnapped, and he's told by Ethan Hawke, you can't escape. There's no way to escape. I'm saving you for something special, and the only way he can communicate with the outside world, kind of, is through a mysterious black phone that actually has the people who previously were kidnapped talk to him and tell him how to escape, how to fight, how to basically survive this whole thing. Meanwhile, his kid sister tries to figure out where he is through use of psychic powers. That's not really a spoiler, that's in the trailer for this movie. So this was a movie that I was both interested in it and I was not interested in it at the same time. I was interested in it because Scott Derrickson and Ethan Hawke previously worked together on the movie Sinister. So I was intrigued because they were re-teaming up for another movie. But the trailers just weren't that interesting for me. And even though the good reviews were coming out, it's just the trailers were not interesting. I remember they had to push this movie back several times, and I just kind of lost interest in it. So I eventually saw this movie, and overall, it's a decent horror movie. I wouldn't say it's as good as their previous collaboration, Sinister, but it's definitely good. What works? First off, a lot of performances are really good, particularly from Ethan Hawke, who is really creepy in this movie. I also really like what they do in the movie with him. Like, they only show his face once throughout the entire movie, and anytime you kind of do see him, his parts of his face are covered, whether it's the whole face or like the bottom part is covered or the top part. You never really see his whole face throughout the entire movie, but it's really creepy throughout the entire movie. Mason Thames, he's also really good as the main kid who's kidnapped. Madeline McCrae, I'm probably mispronouncing that, but I thought she was really good for her performance. Also, James Ransome is in this movie, and for his part, I'm not gonna spoil like what he does in the movie. I remember he was in it chapter two, and I thought he was okay in that movie. Here, he's really good. He's kind of a comedic character at times, but I'm not gonna spoil anything else about the movie. The movie is overall, it definitely is scary, and it definitely is really creepy. I also really like the tributes to Stephen King. Now, The Black Phone is written by Joe Hill, the original book, who I think that's Stephen King's son who just goes under a different pen name. But you can definitely tell the influence of his dad on this movie, and it definitely works overall. Also, the cinematography is also really good. It kind of feels like it is a movie because the movie takes place like back in the 70s or 80s, I believe. And it definitely feels like a movie that did come from that time period. So I thought that worked really well. The score is really creepy and really well done as well. And one thing I was also really nervous about with this movie was the supernatural elements. Now, a lot of Stephen King stories, yeah, they have a lot of supernatural elements in them too. So I thought, like, why does this movie need to have all these supernatural elements in it? It just doesn't make sense. Like, isn't it just scary enough that a kid is kidnapped? Like, I guess not. We gotta add all these supernatural elements in it. But surprisingly, the supernatural elements do work in this movie. And again, I kind of just put that back to the Stephen King tributes to this movie. And I do think this movie is scary on a bunch of different levels, mainly with the whole idea that, kids are just being kidnapped and just who knows what's going to happen to them. Like, obviously, that would be scary enough. So, I feel like it's definitely a movie that does scare on like a bunch of different levels, even though it may not be scary. I think that feeling just sinks through for the rest of the movie. Is there anything in this movie that doesn't work? Well, if you're looking for a movie that explains everything and has a lot of answers to their questions, then you probably shouldn't watch this movie because there are so many times in this movie where I kind of like asked a question about like what was going on and like why they make this choice and they never fully address it. Again, no spoilers, but there were so many times where I'm like, can you please like explain why this happened? No? Okay, moving on. There are also a few pacing issues. The movie is about 100 minutes long, and I feel like this movie could have been just 90 minutes. Like, you can definitely tell that they're trying to stretch this out, but it just doesn't work. And there are also a lot of jump scares throughout this movie, and some of them are effective, some of them are not, and I'm not really a big fan of jump scares. I kind of prefer the ones that are just kind of like creepy and kind of get under my skin and just, it kind of, that stays with me more than just simply a jump scare, I feel like. But overall, The Black Phone is a very interesting movie. It definitely is very creepy. The performances are pretty good for the most part. And it's an interesting tribute to Stephen King through his style, the types of characters he uses. And it's just it's a movie that I think is good. It's a good watch. It's a, well, not good, but it's definitely a well-made movie. Not the scariest movie ever made, but maybe one that just gets under your skin. Also, even though I don't like the fact, I don't know, I'm kind of mixed about that whole they don't explain things. I feel like part of me is intrigued that they don't really explain things, but the other part of me is really annoyed that they don't explain things. I thought that was going to turn a lot of people away from this movie because, oh, we don't really explain what's happening. Turns out it's not a problem because the movie's actually doing pretty well right now. But even though there are some questions that I have about this movie, there are so many pacing issues, and there are jump scares, I think it is kind of worth a watch at some point. But I guess if you're a big fan of Sinister, don't expect Sinister. Kind of expect this to kind of be its own thing and yet at the same time a tribute to Stephen King. So right now, I'll give The Black Phone 3 out of 4 stars. See it? So, what'd you think of The Black Phone? And also, what horror movie surprised you? Comment down below, subscribe to the channel. This is Pat. Stay safe.